Welcome to another episode in the series Impact, where we speak with others who have been impacted by whether it's their teachers, family members, friends, and who are making an impact on others in their work and in the world. So today we so pleased to have a friend and a friend of my one of my good friends from my younger days. I'm pleased to have Jermaine Rowe with us. He is an award-winning actor. He has performed on Broadway in Lion King and Fellow. He is, an amazing artist, and he'll tell us some more about himself. But so I just want to say welcome, Jermaine, and thank you for joining us today.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely welcome. And I'm happy that this program exists and to have the conversation about, growing up and the sort of influences that help you to shape where you are today.
So, Jermaine, somebody listening and watching this would be saying, who is Jermaine? So tell us, who is Jermaine?
I guess there's so many ways of answering that question. I will speak first about myself professionally. I'm an actor, theater maker, and a college professor that focuses primarily on the development of Afro-Caribbean musicals and shows and series. As an actor, I've been doing a lot of work in just across the gamut from, actually, I have an upcoming film I'm working on right now, a lot of stage-based stuff, musicals, Broadway sort of thing. And as a professor, I teach primarily acting and developing new works. But in the last few years, I've focused my career primarily on being one of the persons pushing the conversation forward and creating new musicals on before Broadway and the world stages that are centered around the Afro-Caribbean diasporic folkloric stories. So I want to bring all the folklore stories I grew up here, bring Anansi, River Muma, Rolling Calf, those kind of stories that I heard growing up. I'm trying to take them from oral tradition into a different kind of space where they're documented and presented on an international stage.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to my daughter recently about those stories that I grew up learning, Rolling Calf and River Muma, and, it's something that we are losing. So it's good to know that you're doing something to make sure that is in the limelight. So that's good. You have been acting for a very long time. And one of the things I was going to ask you, which you mentioned, when will I see you in the movies?
Actually, there have been movies already out. There was one on Amazon Prime recently that I think that came down. And I'm actually going to be shooting in the next month another feature film that I just got asked to do that I'm not sure when that's going to release. Movies take a while to release, but I've done a few things. There was a movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. called Freedom that was, I think, on Amazon Prime for a while.
Okay, so we will hear about where to watch those movies and get to see some of you in action. Now, you talk about your professional career, but you started somewhere. So tell us about the younger Jermaine in growing up in Jamaica.
Well, particularly with my performing arts kind of career, I've never not known myself performing, and I'm grateful that my younger self is always still with me. I started performing when I was 5 or 6 years old by myself. Like, my favorite memory of myself was literally being at home, playing outside, performing for my dogs in the trees. Like, I was always the kid who was making up stories, and my mom, bless her heart, never, ever, ever stopped me from doing that. And so it was a really great way for me to learn and to become, because I was using it to help myself keep attentive in school, pretty much. But the first time I realized I had something really special was in church. I was like 6 or 7, and I decided to sing at a little talent thing at church. And I remember singing, and the whole congregation pausing and looking at me. And I remember there was a shift, like, oh my goodness, this kid can really sing. And that's the first time I realized that I had a gift to perform. But it never really got fully into play until high school. I went to Ensom City Primary School. I think time was an all-day school. I was doing other extracurricular. I wasn't doing performing arts per se. I mean, I would sing. I would be afraid because I remember there was like a group of singers who were always doing things there. And I always I want to do what they're doing, but I was too shy. And I never saw the opportunity immediately. But when I went to high school, that's when I really, really started to immerse myself in performing arts. And my class was actually really cool because in my class at the time was an amazing young singer called Grace Hamilton, who is now known as Spice. Yeah. And so we had a really cool class that was all these singers, every day in class singing and just making music. And it was a part of our everyday kind of diet. And so high school was where my performing arts kind of career started to get its legs.
There's so much you have said there that I want to delve into, but let's start with your mom. As a young 5-year-old doing all these things, you will say back in the days, doing the antics, acting for the dogs and running around, and your mom didn't stop that. How did that impact you, building up your confidence to go about, just using your skills that you had?
I mean, I don't know if I can pinpoint how it made me better, but I think the gift of it was I go back to that version of myself a lot when I'm creating. That was a version of myself that I trusted. I knew I was. So when I create work, I always say I channel. I channel my work. I'm not the creator of the work. The work is fed through me. And the young version of myself understood that. I remember, interestingly enough, performing for the trees and the dogs and outside by myself, making things up. I knew I was in relationship to the animals and the plants and everything. There was this kind of connection that was happening. And it's hard to know how to put that down to say it out loud, but when I'm creating now, all the work that I create, there's a freedom that I have to get back to. I say to my students all the time, one of the gifts that I don't want them to lose is their imagination. My imagination is my resource, it's my wealth. And at 5 and 6 years old, I practiced my imagination so vividly that it became it's still accessible to me right now. It is my bank that I go back into when I'm creating. So when I create things now, I tap back into, I haven't lost contact with that 5-6-year-old Jermaine who would go outside and create. So what I do now is, instead of going outside to sing for the trees and the dogs, I have a studio space. I rehearse. I would go in my studio and I would just play. Yeah. I would make up ideas and go, what if? And the gift of the 5 and 6-year-old self is it's not, if you decide that your character is going to float on air, there's nothing to stop you, because at 5 or 6 years old, the imagination says, yeah, we can fly. Yeah, we can run. And I free my mind now when I create my works to have the freedom to just go the direction that my impulses are taking me. So the gift of that, I suppose, was it taught me how to love and relish my young creative impulses and imagination.
Now, growing up then, I take it we didn't have the technology and all those things around, so you had to be creative. How do you see that playing out in the society now that technology is taking over, and what can be done to kind of support children in getting that creative juice flowing still?
I think technology is wonderful. I think the gift of technology, it can, if you know how to use it, it's all about how to use it. What technology does is it has a wealth of resource that I didn't have growing up. I remember my sister and I used to laugh about going to the library and trying to find a resource at the library. And if somebody ripped out the paper of the encyclopedia, that was it. You couldn't find the information. It was no longer accessible. I think if the gift of technology now, because I remember when when I was at university, and technology made me recognize performing art as a possible career. It was through research and looking things up on Google. At the time, I think it was Help Jeeves that was most popular then. You look things up, and I was like, oh my goodness, Alphaville School of Dance in America, and I saw dancers who looked like me, and it made me go, oh, this could be my career outside of this space. So I think if young kids now, the gift of communication and social media, and you can connect to people across the world in very immediate ways, you can use it to tap into your imagination and creativity. So it's about how you use it. Yeah. And it does require because I see young kids now can take up a laptop and do some amazing things so quickly. That's the imagination at play. So I think we have to embrace both of those worlds. But I do believe there is a gift of connecting in person that also still needs to be nurtured, while kids are also, because the Zoom platform made me recognize, having taught on Zoom for like a year and a half and just went back in person about a month ago, how students had to relearn how to engage in person.
Yeah.
And I say students, I teach at a college level, so these are adults.
Yeah.
And we had to still learn how to re-engage in person. So I do believe that there is the balance that should still keep happening, where the technology is a wonderful part of learning information and connecting, but how do we also still engage people in person, and having freedom in that space is also a healthy balance.
Now, as a child in primary school, no doubt you would, bring that acting alive. How did that go down with teachers, and what was there any teacher that supported you through that to kind of develop you with your skills?
I mean, it was different. I mean, they're different. The first teacher I can think of that was a very bold teacher was my grade 6 teacher, Mrs. Allen. She was a teacher who grabbed me up because I was the thing of having access to imagination and a very active child. I think if we still have the world today, they would have diagnosed me with ADHD. I was so overly active, because my brain worked really quickly. And so as soon as the work went on the board, it was done. I was done. And I was like, okay. And I wanted to chat. I was always, Jermaine is an amazing student, but he chats too much. It was that always on my report card.
Yeah.
Because I wanted spaces to, and so she would encourage me to just write stories. She would encourage me to, okay, when you finish, write a story. When you finish, do this, do that. And instead of making it not something that was exciting, she gave me tasks to do. And so much so, I remember in like the 3rd or 4th grade, a teacher of mine asked us to write a story, like one of those stories like, what did you do over the summer kind of story? A day at the beach, one of those stories that you used to get to write.
Yeah.
And I remember writing, and she was like 1 page, and I kept writing. And I remember looking around, and I was at 5 pages in 3rd grade, and everybody was at like half a page or 1 page. And I remember erasing all the pages because I'm like, I don't want to be wrong. And I went up to her, she was like, she's like, what, did you erase all this writing? Did you write all of this? And I was like, yes, miss, but everybody else had 1 page. And she was like, no, write. If you like to write, that much, write. And so that was a moment I didn't realize it was anything special that I could, like, in the 3rd grade, write 5 to 6 pages in a story. Now I use that freedom. I write stories now. So I think teachers just calling things out that oftentimes you don't realize the gift that you have as special or unique. The young version of yourself think, oh, everybody can do this. Everybody can do this. It's not special. Yeah. And it takes one person to just give you like, oh, you do that well, or you do that differently. And you start recognizing that those are your talent and skill points.
Yeah.
I had those teachers.
And I mean, I always said, that, children have not all children will be academically inclined, but if you can find that thing that child, is good at and develop that and support them, and that's a kind word, it will make a difference. You mentioned about going to church, and, that's where you realize that you had that special gift. What part did religion play, or the church play in your development?
Well, it was for my first platform to ground myself, I suppose, in spirituality. I've since connected a lot more to a different way of connecting, but it's a really wonderful access point for me that gave me a lot of grounding in terms of recognizing God as my first primary source of being. And that is and has been very important in my life, because from that space, I understand purpose, because purpose comes directly from that space. And so that church played a really, really important part in just grounding me as I was like now navigating the world. But it was the first space I also, as a performer, understood leadership, being thrown into positions of, I was leading the choir. I was a lead choir. I was singing a lot of leads in the choir in church. And that was very helpful for me to start finding my talent, not just as a space of like, oh, you're good at this, but also in service. So my talent in service to God, but also in service to my community. So the purpose was always bigger. So what you can sing, so what you can act, so what you can dance. What are you using it for? Are you using it for healing? Are you using it for what is your talent for? So church gave me that space. And also, of course, reading the Bible and that space gave me my first arc of how to tell stories, how to navigate storytelling and what stories, how story, I did a class in grad school called Developing New Musicals, and it was about how to write shows. And we actually looked at how and why church sermons are so. Why does church inspire you so much? The way we tell stories, and there's something in it that's not just beyond that. That's not only about the text, but how we tell the stories, how we to inspire people, how we perform the stories, the songs of inspiration, and we use that kind of dramaturgical structure. And so that is helpful for me too. In, are you having church, metaphorically speaking, with the work that you're using to heal? And so a lot of my works that I create now, of course, they're epic stories that are very about the Jamaican Afro-Caribbean diasporic narrative. But my work primarily, purpose-wise, has to create healing in the world, has to create a space where people can see themselves and reflect and go, oh, I feel better about myself having seen this work. And I think that usually comes from me being inspired from a platform of church.
I mean, you're right. When you listen, when you're in church and you hear a story from the Bible and 10 people can tell the same story in a different way and it reaches you. It's an art of telling story. Your mom, how much of an influence is she in your life?
Well, a lot. I mean, in so many different ways, I recognize how much more I've been given in terms of access than my mother's journey. I was given so much more education-wise, access to the world-wise than her journey. And what it does, it gives me a reminder of groundedness. My relationship with her keeps me grounded in the world as I navigate a lot of really different spaces. Also, she's one of the first person I go to whenever I'm doing research around the folk culture. She grew up in a very specific way with her grandparents in the country, and that's a wealth of resource to the culture and access to space. A lot of my work that I create is not just solely based in research of folkloric culture, but I use that space to answer the question I have as an artist. So sometimes I use my work to navigate the relationship with my mother and the relationship with other people and the relationships I see her having. A lot of my work are strong. I always say to people, I'm a product of Jamaican women. Most of my teachers were Black Jamaican women. Most of my mother, my aunts, I had primarily matriarchal leadership than patriarchal leadership growing up. So my work celebrates Jamaican women and Black women and have very different versions of them. So she definitely informs and influences my work in that very direct way as well. What
impact do you think the lack of patriarchal influence during your life have had on you, and how has that changed or shaped you into who you are today?
I don't know if it's a lack of patriarchal influence as much as it is different from what I suppose the narrative we are fed by the world that what it should look like. And Jamaica has a very unique, wonderful family structure that if we take it outside of the history and the why it is, the slave trade and all these things and the demasculation of black men and the shifting away from family, that's a huge part of why it is the way it is. My gift was, a lot of my mentors in Jamaica, my high school teachers, one of the first person who pulled me out and say, you're going to be a lead singer and performer was Dr. Olin Mundell. And so I had a lot of male influences, Professor West Nettleford, Hugh Dowse. So it may not have been directly like in the family, but I definitely had in Jamaica a lot of strong male influences that you saw on the periphery who were a part of also my education system that assisted me. So the fact that women were the dominant leading sources doesn't also say that men weren't present and men weren't influential. And some of them were the big brothers, the big kind of friends, the men. I remember one of my most influential moments when I was walking in my neighborhood. I was like 16, 17, and the neighborhood boys were sitting down, weed in the corner of the mall, just doing the island man thing. And I was walking by, and one of the guys was from another neighborhood. He didn't really know me. And he come at me like, you come here, man, where you go? Come. And the other men were like, no, man, it's a Jeremy and Miss Angela's son that he might go somewhere. Don't influence him. He's one of them who's actually doing well. So they were the men in my neighborhood. They were undereducated. They had lack of opportunities based on several different layers, but they recognized when you were different in the community and they looked out for you. So I did have those influences, but it was, if I was looking for it to be directly paternal, I would have missed the gift of how it came.
That's a very good way at presenting that argument, because so often we see a lack of a father figure in the home, but that doesn't mean the child is lacking some influence from a male that can inspire them and make an impact on their lives. In terms of, growing up in a society like that, where, you'll have those youths on the corner and the influences of gang and the culture that was around you, how did you navigate your way through to make sure you didn't, end up on that path? Education.
Absolutely education. My mother instilled in us education really, really early. And what I love about Jamaica, I was saying to one of my other professors yesterday at the college, you're popular in school because you're bright, not because you're necessarily in sports, although track and field is its own thing. But there's something to be said about a culture that values education. And so my mom forced and pushed education to us a lot. And I immediately, at a really early age, maybe about 11 or 12, when I started to, my academia was getting me into spaces, like I was doing all these speech competitions and all these different things. And I was getting myself outside of my neighborhood, like to go to Kingston and do these competitions. And I started seeing another world outside of my immediate world. And I recognized in my young eyes, my out is my education. How I get out of this neighborhood was how well I learned in school. And so education was my immediate access to how to do it. And I was very grateful that my education and my performing arts were equally strong things that were celebrated by my high school. So as I was pushing being head boy and all these things in high school, I was also the lead of the performing arts president. So I was able to navigate both of them at the same time. So education definitely was the biggest way that I was able to navigate that space. Because at some point, those men in the neighborhood would come to me to ask them to do basic things like, help me fill out this form for me for this thing at the hospital now, or I have my daughter needs somebody to help her with her homework. Can you help her? Because so that also became a part of the pride of the neighborhood, where people would come to me or my sister to help them read basic forms. Or I get a circular from school. I don't know what it said. Could he help me read it? So that also was something that was helpful to me, because you found yourself, because of your education, helpful to your community.
You got your education, and you got a lot of awards in Jamaica, and you eventually got a scholarship to go to the US to study. So the education put you in that stead to develop even further. You went into ballet, doing dancing and that sort of thing. How did that shift, or in a new environment? How did you adjust to that?
I didn't necessarily expect to land into a ballet company. I mean, I was dancing in Jamaica at a really high level with National Dance Theatre Company, and it was more modern folk dance. And so when I got to New York was tough. That first couple of years was rough. It was our first time living outside of home. I mean, by then I had outside of home, meaning I lived away from my physical home when I went to undergrad. But first time living outside of Jamaica and in a whole other context. And it was really, really hard. What kept me going, I suppose, and what I was able to navigate was there's a tenacity that comes with growing up in Jamaica. Like, you had to get up and figure things out. The younger me was working part-time, going to university, dancing full-time, all these different things. And so those skills I had to lean into when I got here. And I'm forgetting the question.
Going into New York and the culture, changing the culture, living on your own and having to navigate that. How did you navigate and develop it? Did you find challenges culturally, or
culturally, not necessarily, because I think by the time I was at UA, I was doing so much with National Dance Theatre Company. I was traveling the world though. I just hadn't lived outside of Jamaica.
Yeah,
and I was traveling a lot, and a lot of my circles of friends were. I was this young student at UA who was hanging out with the Chilean embassy friends speaking Spanish all day, and I was studying Japanese. So by that point, I was speaking 3 different languages already. So I was immersed in how to engage in cultural exchanges. So when I came to New York, I was already familiar with knowing how to fully be myself, but also embracing different cultures. But what the hardest part was like the immigration stuff, the things that nobody told you about, how to work with a student visa, how to navigate those kind of spaces when you're getting job offers, but you can't work because this visa don't do this, how to live every day and finance yourself trying to pursue a career in New York City. Those were the difficult part, the parts that you didn't expect. How to navigate winter is coming and you need to get new coats. So you have to navigate that thing and you're like, oh shoot, And of course, the Jamaican thing, you want to help out family because you're here.
Yeah.
So those are the things that were difficult because I came kind of by myself and I was navigating it a lot through a scholarship in school. And I realized looking back, I'm happy I did it when I was young because now I'd be too scared and have too much responsibility. There's a gift of doing certain things when you're like young and there's a gift to naivety.
Yes.
There's a gift to naivety. There's a gift to when you're like, oh my God, I can do anything in the world. There's a gift, go for it. Go for it then. And I was able to, but I pushed through. I think one of the things that I'm grateful for in who I am and was built by a lot of friends and a lot of mentors, a lot of places. I build community really quickly. I can open my mouth and I can talk. I use my personality to get by. So I made friends really quickly. I was able to be very extroverted. I'm an extrovert. So I will go up to people and say, hey, I'm from Jamaica and I'm trying to find a work here, but I was willing to ask. I was willing to not know. I was willing to fail at it. I was willing to go and make a mistake to be able to get to the next level.
Right.
And so I wasn't afraid of ever failing. Because I knew that in order to go to success, failure is a natural part of the journey. And so I embraced that. I embraced all of it. And I was going out for auditions even if I got the job, I couldn't work.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the work permit, but that didn't stop me from at least auditioning to get the experience.
And to showcase yourself.
And that's how I booked Lion King.
Yeah.
I just going to auditions and I couldn't work. And Lion King was like, oh, you can't work here, but you can work in London. And then they sent me to London. That's how that happened because I'm going to go out. I'm just going to go out and for it because I didn't come all the way here to just go back home. And if I do go back home, I go back home because I gave it all I had. And it was I think it was recognizing I had a lot of people who worked really hard to help me get here. When I applied for school and I got a scholarship, I had a lot of my mentors, Faye Ellington, Professor Rich Nettleford, all the different people who helped me find funding, helped me find that plane ticket for the airfare, the money for the airfare, helped me get money to be able to survive the first couple of weeks I was here. There were so many people who threw surprise parties and collection plate and there were so many people who believed in your journey alongside you. I knew I had to give it my all and I couldn't just come and go, well, it's odd. So, so there was a responsibility that I knew I had, but also there was a 5-year-old Jermaine.
Yeah.
There was 5-year-old Jermaine who knew this was the direction he was supposed to go into. And that's a gift of having a freedom in a young self that you get people who see you and help you to see yourself. Is you start learning, and we go back to church and all these things and the intention and the God factor. You start hearing when a voice is saying, this is where you're supposed to be. I knew when I moved to New York where I was supposed to be. Because my gut told me.
Yeah.
What I didn't know was what the journey was supposed to be, because that was not for me to know.
Yeah.
All I needed to know was this is where it was supposed to be. And even when I shifted to London, I knew London was a shift that I was supposed to be ending back in New York. And I've been here for almost 17 years now. And now it's making sense why. Finally,
yeah.
It took 17 years to find the purpose.
How long were you in London for?
I was in London for 3 years. So I did Lion King for 2 years. I came back to New York, booked Fela. Fela brought me back to National Theatre in London first, where we developed it, a National Theatre. We did it a little bit there, came back to America. And I went back to Europe again, did something in Plymouth, then Sadler's Wells in London. Then we did a tour across like Europe, like I did Amsterdam Amsterdam. Then we came back to America, and then we came back to Broadway. London, the UK for me in total was about 3 years.
And how did you find it, when you came to the UK? How different or similar was it to New York?
Oh, I didn't like UK at all. London, but you know why? One of the best lessons I learned was, and I'm going to be fully honest with this, I don't talk about this a lot. Sorry, New York is an emergency. I don't know if you can hear.
That's all right.
I live in the middle of Manhattan, so it's always loud. But so just a quick FYI, I have to go in like 10 minutes. But
yeah, that's fine.
So I didn't like UK at all because, well, that's not true. I enjoyed UK. I met really wonderful friends. The show was great. But at the time when I was doing work there, we talk about mentors and people in your life who were great, but I had somebody who was really hard to work with. And I don't talk about it much because I'm not one to dwell on things that were kind of like negative, because I think everything builds you to where you need to get to. I'm mentioning this because it was such a difficult work experience that I remember at the time I was just having a hard time even going to work. And I remember having to look at myself going, you've come so far, you're going to let somebody who is pushing you. And I think if I look back at it, they were pushing me towards greatness.
Yeah.
But the methodology was breaking me. The methodology was breaking me. It wasn't the right methodology for me.
Yeah.
My young self it got to the point where I almost was like, okay, I can't do this anymore as a performer. The gift of that was it forced me to really push myself to go, is one person along the journey going to stop all the 10, 20 people who encouraged you?
Yeah.
Then if that's the case, then you don't really believe in yourself. If that's the case, then you don't really want to learn the lessons that this person can teach you, because everyone can teach you a lesson.
Yeah.
The lesson sometimes can be boundaries, how to create boundaries. The lesson can be sometimes how to show up for yourself, even in difficult situations. And the lesson can also be how to speak up for yourself, because that was a lesson I learned from that. The day the breakthrough happened was the day I was like, okay, let's have a meeting. Let's have a face-to-face. Let's talk. And let's be professional about the conversation and have people around who were going to help mediate the process in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And that was a big breakthrough for me, because that was the first time I was challenging authority in a really direct way as myself, as an artist. And I think what's interesting not then, because at that time I was just a hired person in the ensemble sort of thing in the work. The gift of it today, now I'm in charge.
Yeah.
I teach. I am hiring people for my projects. And it has taught me what leadership should look like versus what leadership shouldn't look like. It also has taught me how to be aggressively strong about the work and the intention of the work, while also not breaking people. Yeah. It taught me a lot of wonderful lessons, and only because it didn't break me. So the gift sometimes of really difficult spaces and people that come into your life for whatever reason, hopefully you had what I had, which was really great friends who were also around you at the time, who were seeing what was unfair and was speaking up to you about it, saying, I'm looking at it and it is unfair.
Yeah.
You're not crazy. You're not crazy. You're not crazy. It is unfair. You're not just in your feelings and in your ego. It is an unfair treatment. And so the balance of those things. So London for me was that experience. And so when I think back at it, it is colored by that experience. Because I remember most of the days there, I was just like, oh, okay, I have to do this, I have to deal with this thing, this person, this place. And so another kind of experience would probably have shifted how I looked at the experience there.
So you know, that's so profound that, you know, regardless of whatever the situation or the difficulty you find, there's always something to learn or to gain from that, because now you have used that experience to make you a leader that you're not going to have that happening to somebody as you lead.
Yeah, and in the moment, it's hard to recognize, because in the moment you don't have perspective. The gift of it is faith. You have to trust, if you're doing something that's purpose driven, that everything, good, bad, and indifferent, is towards a purpose. And sometimes you have to walk through the fire to gain the skill. The thing that I've come to accept is, and I say to my students all the time, to get to the next level of life, you need tools.
Yeah.
The workman needs tool for the job. But you cannot, there's nobody that can give you the tools. You can't buy the tools. The tools have to be experienced. It is experience that make you gain the tools. And the best tools, the sharpest tools, come from the hardest experiences.
That is such a lovely way to, you know, wrap this off. Experiences are the tools we need, isn't it?
Yeah, experiences teaches you, give you the tools that you need. You have to walk through it. You have to, you know, people go, oh my goodness, Jermaine, how did you get to where you got to? It's like, you have to get up and do it. I can tell you my journey, but your journey is going to be uniquely yours, because your purpose might be slightly different from mine. So you have to get up and do your journey every single day. It's not life is not a spectator sport.
Yeah.
You have to get up and do it. You have to participate in it. You have to get up and follow your dream. You have to be aggressive. And one of the things that I've learned, relationships is one of the best currencies that you can gain. So treat people well. You never know the simple. Right now, we didn't know that when we met how many years ago?
No, over 25 years.
Over 25 years ago, that 25 years ahead, the relationship would be so respectful and strong from how we met that we can reach out to each other as the world paused and use a platform that we didn't even know would have existed yet to use to benefit and the next generation of people. But the currency is relationship. And so you want to make sure that good friends better than pocket money. We talk about that in Jamaica a lot. Honoring the people that come into your space, because most of the biggest jobs that I've gotten, like right now, two big projects I'm working on right now, major projects that are coming up for me in the next couple of months, have been literally because a relationship was built and somebody emailed me saying, hey, I heard about you. This person recommended you because of blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, I'm going to give you this major opportunity because I met you through this space, and that person comes with great reputation and they recommended you. Relationships are amazing currency. So you want to learn how to treat people well. You want to know how to be present with yourself as you gain the tools along the way.
If somebody out there is listening and hearing this, I'm sure they would think twice about, you know, the relationships that they have, and, you know, not cutting off anybody, but making sure that somebody can see the good things in you. And even if you're having a difficult time, it's about that respect and how you treat people.
Yeah.
Jermaine, you know, it's such a great time catching up with you. I'm just so inspired by the work you're doing, and you left me with some real nuggets that, you know, I will hold on to. Where do we see Jermaine in the next 10 years?
Continue doing exactly what I'm doing right now, which is to be purpose driven. That's my answer to that all the time. To make sure purpose drives me more than ego, and I'm walking in faith more than in fear. That's the only answer I can have to that. And 10 years time 10 years time literally is a manifestation of what I'm doing today.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you will continue to hear of, you know, the cultural impact that you're making, and making sure the stories that we grew up on as children are still out there, whether not being told, but, you know, people can go and act and see it and develop these stories. Jermaine, I want to thank you very much. Your last word to somebody out there that is listening, what would you say to them, maybe struggling to understand that they are making an impact regardless of what they are doing? They are impacting children and others. What would you say to them?
There's so many things that's popping in my brain, but one of the biggest turning point in my career was when I stopped and decided to take myself as seriously as I expect the world to take me. I wanted the world to see me as a serious artist. I wanted people to take me seriously. And I realized I wasn't taking myself as seriously because I wasn't getting up every single day, already working as if I'm making the $1 million check. Mm-hmm. So I say, show up for yourself today. Show up for yourself every single day. Get up and show up for yourself fully with no excuses. And that takes work. It's hard. But don't wait for the opportunity to be present before you start showing up for yourself 110%.
I've been doing quite a few of these. I think probably almost 20 of these interviews I've done. So, and I've just been so blown away by the words that I hear. That, even with me at this time struggling with making decision and, where I go with what I'm doing, because I'm doing this project, not knowing where I'm going with it, but I know there's a purpose for it.
And there's an honesty in that. I think the thing that the most wonderful thing, even with my students, I say that to them. I don't know. This morning, I said to them the other day, this morning I woke up, I felt like giving up. It was so overwhelming. Yeah. And this is how I worked through it, because I know it's not because I don't believe in myself, because it's just hard. And then I kept moving. Like, the honesty in vulnerability is a gift. Vulnerability is strength. And beyond that, it's because recently I redefined the word success for myself. And even beyond that, I went, what does success feel like? And I recognized because I do this thing in my life where I go, stop looking for answers and clarify your question. Yeah. And my question that I clarified was, what does success feel like? And I recognized as I stopped and I slowed down to listen to that answer, if you're not careful, success can feel like anxiety, doubt, fear, imposter syndrome. Why? Because we think success feels like is the euphoria of success, which is after success happened. Yeah. The accolades, the yay. No, that's the euphoria after success. But if you're going in the direction of something bigger, if you're going in the direction of your purpose, if you're going in the direction of challenging yourself to grow, success feels like fear. I don't know what's happening. And so every time I feel that feeling and I go, what is the context that you're feeling that feeling in? Is the context of pushing your work forward. Okay, then what you're feeling is success. Yeah. Because every successful person, anybody who became successful at any high level had to navigate and go through that. Yeah. Oprah had to go through it. Tyler Perry had to go through it. Anybody who got to any level of success, meaning that they follow through on their dream and they get to where we go, oh, they've achieved that. All the feelings of doubt, anxiety, fear that can be misguided. The only reason it's anxiety and doubt and fear is when you're not doing anything. That's what is anxiety and fear and doubt and imposter syndrome. Otherwise, that's a feeling of success.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. And, it's hearing stories like yours and hearing other stories to know that, success is not what the world sees, but that what you put in before you get to that reward.
What you put in before. The world sees the euphoria, the result. Yeah. The gold medal was not won today. Yeah. It was won 4 years ago when you started training. Yeah. Yeah. That is the word. I will leave it at that. Show for yourself, and I'll make sure I continue to do that and develop even. So maybe another 5 years we catch up and we'll be seeing even more of each other. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you very much for joining us. And we say until next time, remember, your life is impacting others, so live right. Until then, see you soon. Please do like, share, and comment, and let us know what you think about this program.